The Ghost of 4th Street. Every month, on the third day at exactly 9 in the morning, my phone vibrates. It is a digital ping that represents $5,000. To most people in this town, that is a fortune. To my son, Elias, it is a guilt tax. He sends the money from a glass office in a city I haven't visited in 5 years. He sends it so he doesn't have to call. He sends it so he can tell his friends he takes care of his poor, aging mother. But there is a secret Elias doesn't know. I haven't spent a single cent of it. I live in a small, weathered house on the edge of town. The porch creaks like an old man's knees. The paint is peeling in long, gray strips. When I walk to the grocery store, I wear a coat with a frayed collar and shoes that have seen better decades. The neighbors look away when I pass. They see a woman defeated by life. They see old Margaret, the lady who lives on scraps. They don't see the stack of bank statements hidden under my floorboards. They don't see the millions I've quietly managed since my late husband passed. I chose the rags. I chose the silence. Because wealth is a magnet for the wrong kind of people. And I wanted to see who would stay when the lights went out. The son who forgot the soil. Elias wasn't always a stranger. He used to be the boy who helped me plant tomatoes in the backyard. But then came the scholarship, the city, and eventually, Sabrina. Sabrina is the kind of woman who measures a person's worth by the brand of their watch. When Elias first brought her home 3 years ago, she wouldn't even sit on my sofa. She stayed by the door, clutching her designer handbag like it was a shield against poverty. She looked at my cracked mugs and my mismatched plates with a focused kind of disgust. That was the day I realized I had lost my son to a world made of polished marble and cold hearts. Since their wedding, the visits stopped. The phone calls turned into text messages. The text messages turned into the monthly $5,000 transfer. It was a clean arrangement. He gave me money, I gave him the freedom to forget I existed. But yesterday, the pattern broke. A black SUV, polished so bright it hurt my eyes, pulled into my gravel driveway. The dust kicked up, coating my old porch in a layer of grit. Elias was home, and he wasn't alone. The unexpected inspection. I was sitting on the porch, darning a hole in an old wool sock. When they stepped out, Elias looked uncomfortable in his tailored suit, squinting at the peeling wallpaper of his childhood home. Sabrina looked like she had stepped off a runway, her high heels sinking into the soft mud of my front yard. "Mom," Elias said, his voice tight. He didn't hug me, he just stood there, looking at my frayed sweater. We were in the area for a business gala. We thought we'd check in. Sabrina didn't even say hello. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her pocket and held it near her nose. "Elias, honey," she whispered, though I could hear every word. "I told you, it's worse than the photos. How can she live like this with the money you send? It's a health hazard." She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face as if I were a broken piece of furniture. "Margaret, really," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Elias works so hard to provide for you. Don't you think it's disrespectful to live in this slum? You're making him look bad." I didn't stop sewing. I didn't look up. "The house is warm enough," I said quietly, "and the tea is hot. Would you like some?" Sabrina let out a sharp, jagged laugh. "In those cups? No, thank you. We're actually here because we have some news. And a request." The desperate proposal. We sat in the small kitchen. The linoleum was worn through to the wood in front of the sink. I sat on a wooden stool while they sat on the edge of the chairs, looking as if they were afraid they might catch poverty by sitting too long. "The firm is expanding, Mom," Elias started, his eyes darting around the room. "We're moving into international markets. But the overhead it's significant. We've hit a temporary cash flow issue." Sabrina leaned forward, her jewelry clinking. The mask of disgust had shifted into something else. Greed. What Elias is trying to say is that we need a bridge loan. Just 200,000. We know you've been saving that 5,000 every month. You haven't spent it on the house. And you clearly haven't spent it on yourself. She looked around the room again, her eyes landing on the old, rusted tin where I kept my tea bags. We know you have it. Margaret, it's just sitting in a bank account doing nothing. Why let it rot here when it could be helping your son become a billionaire? I looked at Elias. Is that why you're here? For the money you gave me? Elias looked at his shoes. It's a loan, Mom. I'll pay it back. It's just, Sabrina's family expects a certain level of investment in this new project. And if we don't show the capital, we lose everything. You have a mansion, Elias, I said. You have 3 cars. You have a life I never dreamed of. And we have a reputation to maintain. Sabrina snapped, her patience finally breaking. She stood up, her expensive perfume filling the small, cramped kitchen. Look at you. You're wearing rags. You're living in a dump. You don't need that money. You don't even know how to use it. Give us the access to the account, or we're going to have to reconsider how we handle your living situation. The threat hung in the air, cold and sharp. She wasn't just asking for the money. She was telling me that if I didn't hand it over, they would find a way to take it, and perhaps take my freedom along with it. The first crack. I stood up slowly, my joints aching. I walked over to the sink and poured the cold tea down the drain. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I don't have the money, I said. Sabrina's face turned a deep, ugly red. Don't lie to us. 5,000 a month for 5 years? That's $300,000. Margaret, where is it? Spent. I lied. I turned to look at them, letting my face look as tired and broken as possible. The roof leaked. The taxes went up. My medicine, it costs more than you think. Elias looked shocked. All of it? Mom, how? But Sabrina wasn't buying it. She stepped toward me, her eyes narrowing until they were like slits. She looked at my hands, my rough, calloused hands, and then she looked at my old, tattered coat hanging by the door. She saw a corner of a white envelope sticking out of the pocket. Before I could move, she lunged for it. She snatched the envelope and ripped it open. Her eyes went wide as she read the contents. It wasn't a bank statement. It was something far more dangerous. Elias, she breathed, her voice trembling. Look at this. Elias took the paper. His face went pale. It was a receipt for a donation. A donation of $50,000 to a local orphanage. Dated only 2 days ago. Signed by Margaret Vance. You've been giving it away? Sabrina screamed. You've been giving our money to orphans while we're struggling to keep our firm afloat? You crazy, senile old woman. She looked at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Then, she looked at the floorboards. She remembered what I had said earlier about the house being old. She looked at Elias and whispered, "She's hiding more. I can feel it. If she's giving 50,000 to orphans, she has a lot more than 300,000. She turned back to me, a desperate, manic smile on her face. If you won't give it to us, Margaret, then we'll just have to prove you aren't capable of managing your own affairs. Elias, call the lawyer. We're filing for guardianship tonight." Elias looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of shame and greed. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He just reached for his phone. But they didn't know that I was waiting for this exact moment. I had one more card to play, and it was going to destroy the world they had built. The heavy silence. The kitchen felt smaller than it did 5 minutes ago. The air was thick with the scent of Sabrina's expensive perfume and the stale smell of my cold tea. Elias held the phone in his hand, his thumb hovering over the screen. He looked at me, then at the peeling wallpaper, then back at his wife. He was looking for a reason to stop. But Sabrina's eyes were like too cold. Bluestones. She wasn't just his wife anymore. She was his commander. I sat back down on my wooden stool. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I simply watched them. In the silence, I could hear the house breathing. The wood shifted. The wind whistled through the gap in the window frame. It was a sound I had grown to love. The sound of a house that didn't need to pretend. "Do it, Elias," Sabrina whispered. Her voice was sharp, like a razor blade hidden in silk. "She's throwing your hard-earned money away. She's living in filth. If we don't step in, she'll be on the street in a month. And your reputation will be in the dirt right along with her." Elias took a deep breath and stepped out onto the porch to make the call. He couldn't even look me in the eye while he betrayed me. Sabrina stayed behind. She stood by the window, watching him through the glass. Then, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You think you're being clever, don't you, Margaret?" she said, walking toward the old wooden hutch where I kept my mismatched plates. "You think playing the martyr makes you better than us. But all it makes you is a target. Once the court sees this place, once they see those receipts for donations you can't afford, they'll hand the keys to us. And I promise you, the first thing I'm doing is bulldozing this eyesore." She began opening the drawers, tossing my old linen napkins onto the floor. She was looking for more. More receipts, more bank books, more proof of the wealth she was certain I was hiding. The ransacked memories. For the next hour, my home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene. Sabrina moved through the rooms like a whirlwind of greed. She tore the blankets off my bed. She emptied the jars in the pantry, spilling flour and sugar across the worn floorboards. She was looking for a stash of cash, a hidden safe, anything that felt like the millions she imagined. Elias came back inside, his face pale. "The lawyer is coming tomorrow morning," he said. His voice was hollow. "He says with the evidence of the donation and the living conditions, we have a strong case for an emergency intervention." He looked at the mess Sabrina had made. He looked at the flour on the floor and the clothes strewn across the hallway. For a second, a flicker of regret crossed his face. He remembered this house when it was filled with the smell of baking bread. He remembered his father sitting in that chair, reading him stories. But then Sabrina walked up to him and pressed her hand against his chest. "It's for her own good, honey," she cooed. "We'll put her in one of those luxury senior communities. She'll have people to wait on her. She won't have to wear these rags anymore." I watched them from the doorway. I stayed quiet. I let them believe they were winning. Because the more they searched, the more they revealed their true nature. And I needed everything on record. I reached into the pocket of my frayed sweater and felt the small, cold weight of my smartphone. It was a modern model, hidden inside a case that looked like a stack of old coupons. It had been recording since the moment they stepped into the kitchen. The midnight watch. They decided to stay the night. They didn't want to leave me alone with their money. They took the guest room. Complaining about the thin pillows and the lack of high-speed internet, I stayed in my small bedroom, sitting in the dark. I looked out the window at the stars. My husband, Thomas, always said that the best way to catch a wolf was to let it think the sheep was sleeping. Thomas had built an empire from nothing, just like Elias was trying to do. But Thomas never forgot the soil. He never forgot the people who helped him climb. Around midnight, I heard the floorboards creak. It wasn't the house settling. It was the sound of footsteps. I stood up and moved to the door, cracking it just an inch. In the hallway, Sabrina was tiptoeing toward the attic stairs. She was carrying a flashlight, its beam dancing nervously against the walls. She wasn't satisfied with the downstairs. She was convinced the real treasure was in the rafters. I followed her at a distance, my wool socks muffling my steps. The attic was filled with boxes of old memories, Thomas's tools, Elias's childhood drawings, and trunks of old clothes. Sabrina ignored the sentimental items. She went straight for the heavy iron trunk in the corner. It was Thomas's old sea chest. It was locked with a heavy, rusted padlock. I saw her pull a small crowbar from her designer bag. She had come prepared. She began to pry at the wood, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. "Come on," she hissed. "I know you're in there. Show me the gold." With a loud crack, the wood gave way. The lid swung open. Sabrina shone her light inside. her eyes wide with anticipation. But as the beam hit the contents, her face dropped. It wasn't gold. It wasn't cash. It was thousands of letters. Letters from people all over the world. People Thomas and I had helped over the last 40 years. Students we had put through college. Families whose homes we had saved. Small businesses we had quietly funded. Each letter was a testament to a life spent giving, not taking. Sabrina began throwing the letters aside. Frantic now. No, this can't be it. Where is it? Where is the real money? The mask slips. You won't find it there. Sabrina. She screamed, spinning around and dropping the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, illuminating my face from below. I stood at the top of the stairs, my old coat wrapped tightly around me. You scared me, you old bat, she yelled, her voice echoing in the cramped attic. She didn't even try to hide her contempt anymore. Where is it? We know Elias sends you $60,000 a year. We know you haven't spent it. Where is the account? Where are the bonds? The money Elias sends is in an account, I said calmly. It's exactly where he put it. I haven't touched a penny of it because I don't need his charity. I never did. Sabrina laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You don't need it? Look at you. You're a walking ghost. You live in a shack. You wear clothes that should be in a trash heap. Of course you need it. I wear these clothes because they are comfortable. I said, I live in this house because it is full of love. I let you believe I was poor because I wanted to see if my son still had a soul. And I wanted to see exactly what kind of woman he had married. I stepped closer, into the light of the fallen flashlight. You've spent the last 4 hours destroying my home, looking for a way to steal from a woman you think is helpless. You've plotted to take my freedom so you can fund a lifestyle you can't afford. You're not a wife, Sabrina. You're a parasite. Sabrina's face contorted with rage. She stepped toward me, the crowbar still in her hand. You think you're so smart. But tomorrow morning, the lawyer arrives. We'll tell them you're delusional. We'll tell them you're making up stories about being rich to hide the fact that you've lost your mind. Who do you think they'll believe? The successful young couple or the woman living in a junkyard? She leaned in close, her breath smelling of expensive wine and bitterness. Give me the access codes now. And maybe I'll let Elias visit you in the asylum once a year. If you don't, I'll make sure you never see the sun again. The final guest. The silence that followed was broken by a soft thud downstairs. Then, the sound of the front door opening. Sabrina froze. Elias? Is that the lawyer? It's too early. We walked down the stairs together. Sabrina still clutching the crowbar, her hair disheveled from her search in the attic. Elias was standing in the foyer, looking confused. Standing in front of him were 2 men in dark, tailored suits. They didn't look like local lawyers. They looked like federal agents. Elias Vance? One of the men asked. His voice was like iron. Yes? Elias stammered. What is this about? I'm Special Agent Miller from the Financial Crimes Division, the man said. He held up a badge. We've been monitoring a series of international transfers tied to your firm. Specifically, several $1 million that seem to have disappeared into offshore accounts linked to your wife's maiden name. Sabrina's face went from red to a ghostly, translucent white. She dropped the crowbar. It hit the floor with a heavy metallic clang. There must be a mistake, she whispered. We were starting a new project. There's no mistake, Agent Miller said. He looked past them, his eyes finding mine. He gave a small, respectful nod. We received a very detailed tip-off this evening, along with a complete digital trail of the embezzlement. Elias turned to look at me, his eyes wide with horror. Mom? What did you do? I pulled the smartphone from my pocket and stopped the recording. I didn't do anything, Elias, I said softly. I just opened the door for the truth. You were so busy looking at my rags that you forgot to look at what was happening in your own home. But as the agent stepped forward to lead Sabrina away, she let out a scream of pure desperation. She grabbed Elias's arm, her nails digging into his skin. It's her, she shrieked, pointing at me. She's the one with the money. She has millions. Check her accounts. She's hiding it all. The agent looked at me, then back at Sabrina. He smiled a very thin, very cold smile. We know exactly who Margaret Vance is. Mrs. Vance. She's the woman who owns the bank you've been stealing from." The room went deathly silent. Elias looked like he was about to collapse. Sabrina's jaw literally dropped. But then, the front door creaked open one more time. A third man walked in. He wasn't an agent. He was carrying a leather briefcase. And he looked older than the house itself. He was my personal attorney. And he had a document in his hand that was about to change everything. "Margaret," he said, stepping over the spilled flour. "The paperwork is ready. Should we proceed with the eviction and the total asset freeze? Or would you like to hear their apology first?" I looked at my son. I looked at the woman who had tried to destroy me. And for the first time in 5 years, I let them see the woman behind the rags. The mask collapses. Elias stood there, his breath ragged. He looked at me, then at Agent Miller, and finally at the wife he had once worshipped like a goddess. His world was disintegrating. The numbers, the international projects, the illusions of grandeur Sabrina had painted, all of it was a sandcastle being swept away by the tide. "Mom, you own that bank?" Elias stammered, his voice trembling like a child lost in the woods. I didn't answer him immediately. I turned my gaze toward Sabrina. She was no longer the arrogant woman in designer labels. She looked like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted incessantly, searching for an exit that didn't exist. She glanced at the crowbar on the floor, then at the window, but the agents had already surrounded every escape route. "I don't just own that bank, Elias," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. "I am the one who ordered the freeze on those accounts 3 days ago. I've been waiting for you to come here. I hoped that when faced with my poverty, you would choose to protect your mother instead of listening to her hollow, maddening greed." Sabrina let out a guttural roar, a sound that wasn't human. "You crazy old hag, you trapped me. You wore those rags on purpose to mock us. You have all that money but let your own son struggle with debt." "Elias didn't struggle because of debt," I cut her off. "He struggled because of your greed. And he struggled because he forgot that money is just a tool, not a soul." The nameless will, my old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stepped forward. He didn't look at Elias or Sabrina. He only looked at me, waiting for a nod. "Mrs. Vance," Henderson said, his voice echoing in the small kitchen, "I have prepared the paperwork to reclaim the city mansion and all assets under the subsidiary companies. Since the embezzled funds were moved through accounts you control, legally, they now belong to the Thomas Vance Memorial Charity." Elias collapsed to his knees. "Is everything gone?" "Not everything," I said, stepping closer to him. "You still have this house. It is the only asset I will never sell. But starting tomorrow, you will have to learn to grow tomatoes again. Just like you did when you were 10. You will have to learn to live without the $5,000 monthly guilt tax you sent me." Sabrina burst into a jagged, bitter laugh. "You think he'll stay here? With you? In this tomb? Don't dream, Elias. Let's go. We still have other connections, we can start over." She grabbed Elias's arm, trying to pull him up. But Elias pushed her away. For the first time in 3 years, he looked at her with genuine disgust. "What connections, Sabrina?" Elias asked. "The friends you bought with my mother's money? Or the partners you've already betrayed?" The decisive blow. Agent Miller stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on Sabrina's shoulder. "Mrs. Vance, Sabrina, you are under arrest for financial fraud and conspiracy to seize assets. You have the right to remain silent." As the cold handcuffs locked around Sabrina's wrists, she glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You won, you old witch, but you'll die alone in this rotting shack. Nobody loves you, even your son only loved your money." I smiled, a sad, weary smile. "You're wrong, Sabrina. I am never alone. I have the memories of Thomas, and I have the letters in the cellar that you threw away like trash. As for you, you'll have plenty of time within 4 stone walls to think about how your designer labels look when replaced by a prison uniform." As Sabrina was led to the car, Elias remained seated on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the mess of flour and sugar his wife had scattered earlier. He looked around the house, at the cracks in the walls he had once despised. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at him, my only son. My heart tightened, but I knew I couldn't soften now. Forgiveness given too easily would only create another weak man. An apology cannot repaint these walls, Elias, I said, and it cannot restore the Vance family honor. Tomorrow, I am leaving. Elias looked up, panicked. Where are you going? This is your home. I am going to travel. I am going to visit the people who wrote those letters, I said, pointing toward the dark cellar. As for you, you will stay here. You will work the farm behind the house. You will live on exactly what a common laborer earns. If you are still here in a year, we will talk again. The final secret beneath the floorboards. Elias stared at me as I picked up the old suitcase I had packed long ago. He didn't know that inside that suitcase, there were no fine clothes or expensive jewelry. It held only one thing. I stepped out the door but stopped at the threshold. I pointed to the floorboards right beneath Elias's feet. Before I go, I have one thing to tell you. Sabrina was right about one thing. I did hide a treasure under these floors. Elias looked down at the wood. What is it, Mom? Money? Gold? I looked at him one last time. My eyes filled with a mix of disappointment and a sliver of hope. There is no money under those boards. Elias, there is an iron box. Inside is your father's diary from his final days. He wrote about how proud he was of you when you earned your first $1 by helping him fix the fence. I took a deep breath. If you want to be wealthy again, Elias, don't look for it in a bank. Look for it in that box. And remember, the rags I wear are not because I can't afford new clothes. I wear them to remind myself of where we started. I walked down the steps, the gravel crunching under my feet. My luxury black SUV was waiting at the end of the road. But I had instructed the driver to park far away so Elias wouldn't see it. But when I had gone only 10 paces, a strange sound erupted from behind me. A loud explosion. I spun around. Black smoke began billowing from the living room windows. Elias stumbled out the door, his face smeared with soot. He was screaming something I couldn't quite hear. The house was on fire. The house containing all my memories, all those letters, and that iron box, was being swallowed by flames. And I realized then, someone hadn't been taken away by the police tonight. Someone was still lurking in the shadows, and their game had only just begun. The heat was a physical blow. It didn't crawl, it roared. Within seconds, the dry, weathered wood of my childhood home, the house Thomas and I had built with our bare hands, was transformed into a towering torch. The orange glow reflected in the puddles of mud, turning the yard into a scene from a nightmare. Elias was screaming, not for himself, but for the house. He ran toward the porch, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet grass. He was trying to get back inside. Elias, no, I shouted, the wind from the fire whipping my hair across my face. He didn't listen. He disappeared into the thick, black smoke of the foyer. For a heartbeat, the world went silent, save for the crackling of the timber. I stood there, frozen. I had planned for the betrayal. I had planned for the bank's recovery. I had even planned for the arrest. But I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't planned for the possibility of losing my son to the very memories I was trying to save him with. The hero in the smoke. Minutes felt like hours. The roof groaned, a sound of dying metal and wood. Just as I was about to rush in after him, a figure stumbled out of the haze. Elias was crawling, his suit jacket draped over his head, coughing so hard he fell onto the gravel. In his arms, he wasn't clutching gold. He wasn't holding his laptop or his wallet. He was clutching the heavy, scorched iron box from under the floorboards. The diary. I ran to him, kneeling in the dirt, ignoring the heat that singed my skin. He looked up at me, his face blackened by soot, his eyes streaming tears that left white tracks through the ash. I got it, Mom, he wheezed, his voice raw. I couldn't let it burn. I couldn't let him burn. In that moment, the clear money executive was gone. The man who cared about international markets and designer handbags was dead. The boy who helped his father fix the fence had returned. He had risked his life for a book of words and a handful of old letters. But as we sat there on the grass, watching the roof collapse in a shower of sparks, a cold realization washed over me. The fire hadn't started in the kitchen. It hadn't started near the stove. The first blast had come from the back of the house, where the old study was. Someone hadn't just wanted to burn the house. They wanted to burn the evidence. The shadow in the SUV. The sirens were distant, a lonely wail in the night. The federal agents had already driven Sabrina away, unaware of the inferno behind them. But as I scanned the line of trees at the edge of the property, I saw it. A pair of headlights flickered on. Not a police car, not an ambulance, a silver sedan, parked deep in the shadows of the old oak grove. The car didn't speed away. It sat there, watching us. For a brief second, the driver's side window rolled down. I saw the glint of a watch, a very specific, very expensive gold watch. It was a model Thomas had given to his partner, Marcus, 30 years ago. The man I thought was dead. The man who had disappeared after the accident that nearly bankrupted our family before our first success. The window rolled up, and the car vanished into the dark, leaving only the smell of burnt rubber and wood smoke. Sabrina wasn't the mastermind, she was just a pawn. She had been taking orders from someone who knew exactly where the floorboards creaked and exactly what was hidden in that iron box. The Phoenix Protocol. The fire department arrived too late to save the structure, but they managed to keep the trees from catching. By dawn, the house was a skeleton of charred black ribs. Elias sat on the bumper of my car, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket. He looked at the iron box in his lap. He hadn't opened it yet. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. What now, Mom? We have nothing left. The house, the money, it's all gone. No, Elias, I said, standing tall despite the exhaustion. The house was just wood. The money was just paper. We have the one thing Marcus didn't think we'd keep. I reached into the iron box and pulled out a small, false bottom that had survived the heat. Inside was a single, encrypted USB drive and a physical key to a safety deposit box in Zurich. Your father knew this day might come, I whispered. He knew that the people who tried to destroy us decades ago would come back when they smelled success. He didn't build a bank just to make money. He built it to trap a ghost. Elias looked at the key, then at the ruins of his home. You mean this whole time, the rags, the $5,000, it was a distraction? It was a shield, I said. I needed Marcus to think I was a broken, senile woman. I needed him to think his mole, Sabrina, had everything under control. I let her steal that money because every dollar she moved left a digital footprint that leads directly back to him. The final game begins. I signaled to the driver of the black SUV that had been waiting down the road. This time, it pulled right up to the charred remains of the porch. Where are we going? Elias asked, standing up. We're going to find your wife's employer, I said, my voice as cold as the morning dew. And we're going to show him that you should never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose but her rags. But as we got into the car, my phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. I answered it, putting it on speaker. Margaret, a gravelly, familiar voice said, the fire was a warning. You should have stayed in the rags. If you use that key, I won't just burn your house. I'll burn everything your son has left. Starting with the girl he doesn't know about. Elias froze. The girl? What girl? The line went dead. Elias turned to me, his face pale. Mom, what is he talking about? I don't have a daughter. Sabrina and we never. I looked at my son, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of genuine fear. There was one secret Thomas had kept even from me. A secret that Marcus was now using as a knife at our throats. Drive, I told the driver, to the city. We have 3 hours before the bank opens, and a lifetime of lies to uncover. The city lights blurred into long, neon streaks as the SUV tore through the night. Inside the cabin, the silence was heavy enough to suffocate. Elias sat next to me, his hands shaking as he stared at his blackened fingernails. He was a man who had built his life on the idea of control. Yet in a single night, he had discovered he was a character in a play he didn't understand. I looked out the window. The rags were gone. I had changed into a simple, charcoal gray suit in the back of the car, a garment that cost more than the $5 he sent me every month. I didn't feel like a billionaire. I felt like a soldier returning to a war one thought I'd already won. "Mom," Elias whispered, his voice cracking. "Who is she?" "The girl Marcus mentioned. If we didn't have kids, who is he talking about?" I didn't answer immediately. I reached into my bag and pulled out a leather-bound folder. Inside was a photograph, yellowed at the edges. It showed a young woman with a bright, wide smile, standing in front of a university library. Beside her was a toddler with Elias's exact eyes. "Her name is Elena," I said softly, "and the little girl is Lily. You met Elena in London. During your internship 10 years ago. You fell in love. You were going to stay there. But Marcus and your father's old board of directors didn't want you in London. They wanted you back here, under their thumb, groomed to be the face of the firm." Elias took the photo, his breath hitching. "Elena, she told me she didn't want to be with me. She said she moved on." "She didn't move on, Elias. She was paid to disappear. Marcus threatened her family's business. He told her that if she stayed with you, he would ensure your father's bank collapsed. She sacrificed her happiness to save our family. And Sabrina? Sabrina wasn't just a wife. She was the watchdog Marcus hired to make sure you never looked back." The secret sanctuary. We didn't go to my son's glass-walled penthouse. We went to the industrial district. To a converted warehouse that appeared abandoned from the outside. The driver swiped a card. And the heavy iron doors rolled up, revealing a high-tech command center hidden within the brick walls. This was the Vance Intelligence Hub. For 5 years, while I sat on that creaky porch in my rags, I had been funding this. My simple life was the perfect cover to monitor every transaction, every email, and every move Marcus made. "Welcome back, Mrs. Vance," a young man in a headset said, nodding to me. Elias looked around, stunned. "You've been running this, while I was sending you money for groceries? I needed you to believe I was helpless. Elias, if you knew the truth, Sabrina would have felt it. She was trained to spot deception. The only way to keep the secret was to make it the reality. I lived in those rags so that one day, I could pull Marcus out of the shadows." I walked over to a large monitor. "Marcus thinks he has the upper hand because he has Lily. He's holding them in a safe house in the countryside. He thinks I'll trade the Zurich key for their lives." "And will you?" Elias asked, his eyes desperate. "No," I said, tapping a key on the console. "Because I've already sent a team. But that's not the play. The play is to take away the only thing Marcus actually loves, his legacy." The Zurich connection. The clock hit 8 a.m. The financial markets in Europe were wide open. I pulled the small USB drive from my pocket and handed it to the head technician. "The Zurich key isn't just for a safety deposit box," I explained to Elias. "It's a kill switch. Your father knew that Marcus had built a shadow network within our bank, a series of ghost accounts, used for money laundering and illegal trades. The key doesn't open a box of gold. It opens the vault to the evidence. If you trigger it, the bank will be investigated." Elias realized, his face pale. "Everything I've worked for, my career, the Vance name, it will be dragged through the mud." "It's already in the mud, Elias. It's just been polished to look like gold. We have to burn the infection to save the body." I watched the screen as the progress bar climbed. 20%, 40%, 60%. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse flickered. The monitors turned bright red. A distorted image appeared on the main screen. It was Marcus. He wasn't in a suit. He was in a dark room. The glow of a cigar the only light on his face. "You're playing a dangerous game, Margaret," he rasped. "You think you're the only one with a kill switch? I've planted enough irregularities in your son's personal accounts to send him to prison for 30 years. If that bar hits 100%, I press enter. You get the bank, but I get your son's life. Is the girl worth more than the boy?" The mother's gambit. Elias looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. He knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. The bridge loans Sabrina had asked for, the international transfers, they had been carefully choreographed to look like Elias was the one stealing. "Mom, stop it," Elias begged. "He'll ruin me. Let him have the key. We can find another way." I looked at my son. I saw the fear, but I also saw the man who had run back into a burning house for an old iron box. "Elias," I said, my voice steady, "do you trust me?" I don't know who you are anymore," he sobbed. "Trust the woman who raised you, not the woman in the rags." I turned back to the screen. "Marcus, you think you know me because you watched me for 5 years. You saw a woman who gave up. You saw a woman who accepted your charity. But you forgot who Thomas Vance married. I didn't marry him for his money. I married him because we were both predators." I leaned in closer to the microphone. "I'm not stopping the upload. In fact, I'm accelerating it, and I've added a little something extra. I've linked your personal offshore accounts to the same server. If Elias goes down, you go down with him. We'll be sharing a cell block. Marcus, how do you think the people you've robbed will treat you in a place where your watch doesn't matter?" The bar hit 90%. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes burning with fury. "You're bluffing. You'd never destroy your own son." "Watch me," I said. I reached out and hit the final enter key myself. The screen went black. The warehouse was silent. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then, the technician's voice broke the tension. "Upload complete. The data is with the Global Financial Task Force. And, ma'am, we have a signal. The rescue team just breached the safe house. Elena and Lily are secure." The aftermath of the storm. 3 days later, the world was a different place. The news was filled with the Vance scandal. Marcus had been arrested at the airport, trying to flee to a non-extradition country. Sabrina was facing additional charges of conspiracy and kidnapping. The bank was under federal receivership, its stock price plummeting. I stood on the balcony of a quiet hotel overlooking the harbor. The wind was cool, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like I could breathe. Elias walked out to join me. He looked older. The soot was gone, but the lines on his face remained. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans. "They're downstairs," he said. "Elena and Lily. Lily wants to know if the grandma in the photos is real." I felt a tear prick my eye, but I brushed it away. "And Elena?" "She's angry," Elias admitted, "but she's here. We have a lot of years to make up for. A lot of explanations." He looked at me, a strange smile on his face. "So, what happens now? The firm is gone. The house is gone. We're officially as poor as you pretended to be." I smiled and reached into my pocket, pulling out a small, worn-out coin. It was the first dollar Thomas and I had ever earned together. "We're not poor, Elias. We've just cleared the ledger. We have our names, we have each other, and we have the truth." I handed him the coin. And besides, I might have kept one small account in the Cayman Islands that Marcus never found. Just enough to buy a new house. A house with a porch that doesn't creak. Elias laughed, a real, genuine sound that I hadn't heard in years. He hugged me then, a real hug, not a guilt-ridden one. But as we turned to go inside, I saw a black car idling at the corner of the street. The driver caught my eye and gave a subtle, respectful nod before pulling away. The war was over, but the world was still full of shadows, and I knew that as long as I lived, I would never truly be able to throw away my rags. Because sometimes, the only way to see the truth is to look at the world from the bottom up. The dust of the scandal finally settled, but for those left in the wake, the world was forever changed. The headlines had moved on to the next corporate disaster, yet in the quiet corners of our lives, the real story was just beginning. It wasn't about the millions lost or the banks that collapsed. It was about the cost of a human soul. The glass cage. Sabrina's new home was not made of marble. It was made of concrete and reinforced steel. There were no designer handbags here, only the heavy, orange fabric of a state-issued jumpsuit. I visited her once, not out of spite, but out of a sense of completion. She sat behind the plexiglass, her skin pale and her hair unkempt. The fire in her eyes had been replaced by a hollow, flickering resentment. She didn't ask about Elias. She didn't ask about the family. She only asked one thing. "Where did you hide the rest of it?" she whispered, her voice rasping against the speaker. Even now, surrounded by the ruins of her life, she was still looking for the gold. She was a prisoner not of the state, but of her own hunger. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, a woman who had everything and threw it away for the promise of more. I realized then that Sabrina was never the villain of the story. She was a warning, a living example of what happens when you let the currency of the world become the currency of your heart. I stood up and walked away, the sound of her pounding on the glass echoing in the sterile hallway. That was the last time I ever saw her. The Garden of Redemption. Elias didn't go back to the city. He stayed in the small town, living in a modest apartment above the local library. He worked for the foundation I had established, the one that funded the very letters Sabrina had tried to burn. He spent his days helping families who were facing the same corporate predators he used to represent. But his real work happened at 4 o'clock every afternoon. That was when he walked to the park to meet Lily. Watching them together was like watching a man learn a new language. At first, he was stiff, awkward, afraid that his touch might break her. But children have a way of melting the coldest steel. He didn't tell her he was a former millionaire. He told her he was a gardener. He taught her how to plant seeds, how to wait for the rain, and how to respect the soil. He was finally learning the lesson his father had tried to teach him, that true wealth isn't what you send in a bank transfer. It's what you give when you have nothing else. The quiet power. As for me, I didn't buy a mansion. I bought a small, sturdy house on a hill, overlooking the valley. It had a porch, yes, and it creaked just enough to remind me of the past. But the paint was fresh, and the garden was full of life. I still wore my old wool coat on cold mornings. People in town still called me Old Margaret. They didn't know about the board meetings I attended via encrypted video calls. They didn't know that the senile woman on the hill held the keys to the most influential ethical investment fund in the country. I kept the rags. I kept them in a cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Every morning, I would touch the frayed fabric. It was my anchor. It reminded me that the world sees only the surface, the clothes, the cars, the titles, but the truth is always hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone with enough patience to look. The final ledger. One evening, Elias came over for dinner. We sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. Lily was asleep on the swing, her small hand tucked under her chin. "I found something in the diary," Elias said, pulling a small, charred scrap of paper from his pocket. It was tucked into the very back, almost fused to the leather. He handed it to me. It was a note from Thomas, written in his precise, elegant hand. It was dated the week before he passed. "To my son, one day, you will think the world is yours. You will think you have conquered the mountain. But remember this, the mountain was there long before you. And it will be there long after. Don't spend your life trying to own the peak. Spend it making sure the people at the bottom have a path to climb." Elias looked at the valley below. "I spent so long trying to buy the mountain. Mom, I almost forgot how to walk." "You're walking now, Elias," I said, resting my hand on his. "And that's all that matters." The monthly $5,000 transfers had stopped long ago. In their place was something far more valuable. A phone call on Sunday. A shared meal on Tuesday. A laugh that didn't feel like a transaction. The ghost's warning. But as the stars began to poke through the darkness, a familiar chill settled over the porch. I thought about Marcus, sitting in his cell, and the network of shadows that still lingered in the world of high finance. The battle I had fought wasn't just for my son or my bank. It was a battle for the future. Marcus was just one man. But the greed he represented was an ancient, shapeless beast. It would find a new face. It would wear a new suit. It would find a new woman to whisper into the ears of ambitious men. I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in the twilight. She would grow up in a world that would try to tell her she was defined by what she owned. She would be tempted by the same gold that had blinded her father. I realized my work wasn't done. The rags weren't just a costume for the past. They were a uniform for the future. Elias, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Do you remember the first rule your father taught you about the bank? Elias nodded, his eyes reflecting the distant stars. Never let the money see you coming. Exactly, I said, a small, sharp smile playing on my lips. Tomorrow, we start the next phase. There are others like Marcus out there. Others who think they can prey on the weak because they wear rags. It's time we showed them that the rags are the most dangerous thing in the room. I stood up, the old floorboards creaking under my feet. The story of the poor mother was over. But the story of the silent guardian was just beginning. And this time, I wouldn't be hiding under the floorboards. I would be the one holding the light.